and that moment when that tossing about occurs and whatever framing or synthesis I had in mind is broken, is part of the challenge. But this is the world we live in, and I'll be talking about that a bit along the way. So think of this as a work in progress, as an improv, where I am, perhaps where we are at this moment, and perhaps a way where we might go. To put it another way, I think I've spent about, actually I confess, I've spent more than 40 years to be unprepared for this talk today and the conversation with you for this moment in time. And I mean that in two senses. I mean it globally, because the extraordinary changes in the world are difficult. We'll return to that a little bit, although I wouldn't be telling you anything you don't already feel. But also locally. So locally, my early development, I think of as being very much interested in both the humanities and what we now call computer science. So a combination of literature, theater, film, and machines, which when I was in school as an undergrad, machines meant computers. When I was a child, even machines meant computers of a sort. And I was always interested in interaction, human-to-human interaction, human-to-machine interaction. And I found when I got to college that AI was completely unsatisfying. And by that, I mean that it was not humane. It didn't feel the way humans felt to me in interaction, even though AI, even of that era, was trying to be about that. I feel, in a sense, lucky to have been born on that cusp, that moment when suddenly digital technology was going to come along and, in fact, overwhelm us. But fortunately, I came across a field, a discipline, that I'll be telling you much more about later on. And that discipline, to me, has both humane and purposeful and ethical features to it. So having lived through a variety of eras of AI, at least three, depends on how you want to count. And even when I say AI, I hesitate, because although the intentions are the same, the technology, the methodology, the substrate, the kinds of calculations being done have changed in a couple of different generations between the time I started and now. And I still feel that there's enormous confusion about what machines do and what machines understand, and indeed how humans understand what machines do. And this is what's changing every hour. You may have seen a Guardian article, I think it was earlier this week or last week, telling us all of the places that we have AI in our lives. And that was meant to be a surprise. I don't think it's a surprise to those of us in the field. So, although unprepared, I feel like I've also spent time wanting to prepare and to bring input and humility and empathy for where we are as a species now and what the challenges may be. So even if this isn't a presentation, I'd like to use some of the conventions of presentation, for example, the title, an abstract, and so on, and so on. And so this has been my prologue. I'll now move to Act 1. The title is Keeping Our Meaning of Meaning. It's italicized if you go to the little link that Sam kindly provided. Our meaning in meaning. You know what I mean? Yes, no, maybe. I'm serious, even though I'd like to be playful about it sometimes. Let me go to the questions that are in my abstract. You've likely seen them, but there'll be a recurring theme. So there are two main questions in the abstract. Question one, paraphrase. If you knew a human being who was a sort of savant or feral child or unusual creature who somehow didn't have a lot of experience in the world, but who spoke very coherently and gave you sentences and responded to your prompts, what would you want from that? And how would what you want from that be different than other circumstances? You with yourself in contemplation, close colleagues, sermons, presentations, etc. How would that be different? And question number 2, if you were trapped in a cell forever with either another human being or an AI, which would you choose? Now, I think you realize, I'm teasing here, this is the life we lead already, to some extent, to a great extent. Again, the Guardian article. When we ask chatbots, even if we know that they're chatbots, what do we want from them? And how is it that our daily lives can be so suffused with these things? This is the life we're leading. Well, I'm sorry, are we leading it? I'm not always sure. This idea of control or agency, the idea that humans and machines have a kind of symbiosis, that word has been around for many decades in computer science. So I'm juxtaposing today's world and artificial intelligence and the increase of AI in our everyday lives. And again, I'm not going to give you a survey. I assume that we're all familiar with that. So if AI is becoming a deluge, what's the disaster recovery plan? So, European Union trying to pass laws. Our government here in the US is about to say something about regulation and so on. I think this issue has been around a long time. I don't know why we're only now getting to it. I'd like to read you a quote and ask you to take a guess, or perhaps you know the quote, although it's not widely published. When was this quote written and by whom? Quote, "Moreover, if we move in the direction of making machines which learn and whose behavior is modified by experience, we must face the fact that every degree of independence we give the machine is a degree of possible defiance of our wishes." Any idea? What year?
So,
Anyone in the audience care to guess? I don't know how easy it is to make it interactive. You're probably all muted.
any guesses? Bertrand Russell?
No.
Okay. Heidegger?
Who?
Heidegger?
No.
Okay. Any other guesses?
1949, Norbert Wiener, in the field called cybernetics. He wrote the book called Cybernetics, right? He wrote this book, which changed generations of discipline in the scientific community. We can argue about how much it's still around, but other books have been written too. I hope you know this book, Computer Power and Human Reason, by Joe Weizenbaum, or in America we would say Weizenbaum. Calculation, judgment. He's making a beautiful distinction here, right? I don't quite know why it's reversed. Computers to humans, but humans to calculation. I think he's talking about the reduction that we get if we think that we can make machines reason the way humans do. It's a wonderful book. He speaks very articulately about how we don't have judgment. Machines don't have judgment. We wouldn't have judgment if we were not born to mothers, if we did not have childhood, if we don't habit human bodies or possess psyches. We don't have judgment without those things. This is what Weizenbaum said around 1976. He also said, we cannot humanize AI because AI is fundamentally non-human. I think it's interesting to revisit these things. He also said, perhaps even more, remember, he was the creator of the first chatbot called Eliza, named after Eliza Doolittle, from Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, of course. He says, quote, AI is an index of the insanity of the world. Lots of people think this. I don't know whether you're fond of Chomsky or not, but he and his authors in the New York Times back in March make a beautiful distinction between how machines can describe and predict based on statistics. I have a vote for Chomsky, apparently. But although they can use statistics to describe and predict, they cannot explain. They cannot know what is the case and what is not the case. So why are we so seduced by these machines? Why do we sit in front of them, even as Weizenbaum talks about an admin who was working for him, knowing that it was a machine in the 1960s, asked him to leave the room so that the conversation could become personal. I think part of the blame, should go to the vocabulary that we in the world are subjected to. For example, we're told AI understands language, AI knows, AI means. This is an abomination. I don't know why we allow it. Now, these words, this terminology is to the benefit of those who use it, the engineers who like the idea that they're making a machine that understands. That's also desired by the venture capitalists who fund the engineers, right, who want to raise the valuations of their companies. And even journalists who don't really know how it works, but are listening to the singular voices of the above sources. And the journalists are trying to sell stories. I can point out very quickly, even the term hallucination, you probably heard about this. Chatbots, large language models these days get it wrong because they make stuff up, euphemistically speaking, and that's called hallucinating. I don't think it's as sophisticated as hallucinating. So these large language models, again, I think you know the phrase, language, they have language in them. They take language as input. I agree with that. I'm not sure they know what language is, and I'm not sure what their modeling is. It's fascinating, though. You can ask a large language model to produce a recipe that sounds like the King James Bible. Fascinating, just terrific. But of course, it's a slippery slope, and many think that it's a matter of a simple step to get intelligence in the human sense, artificial general intelligence, to get sentience, and so on. But where did today's AI come from? Well, it comes from computers, right? That much we know. But I also think it comes from what I would call a kind of culture of the digital. And one of the links linked to in the chat, we'll talk about this. I think AI fundamentally, the people implementing AI, fundamentally misconstrue very important ideas. So the first concept is that of interaction. Digital culture thinks of interaction as kind of mechanistic, right? So every gesture that occurs, every click and so on, is interpreted as well-defined, unambiguous, and the machine, the programmer, expects a response, right? Knows kind of what would be coming at it. So AI's, quote, interaction is an input to a process that's a very predictable input-output function. Today's AI also assumes that information is objective, that if I give you this text to the machine, that the machine understands in some objective sense. I'm being a little loose here, but work with me. I'm trying to make an argument, and I think hope you'll see that there's some value to the argument. Today's AI also assumes that intelligence is a process that sits inside a person or sits inside a machine. And there are alternatives to this way of thinking, right? What I don't like about those three ways of thinking about interaction, information, and intelligence, where is novelty in that? Where does transparency and novelty together become part of the value that we have? Where is their choice in it? And ultimately, where is their conversation? So this is about human agency, human purpose, human intention, human desires. And my feeling is we're not much paying attention to all of that. And I think that's a problem. So as I mentioned, as a kind of teaser in the prologue, I came across this discipline that's both humane and purposeful. And I need to very quickly give you a sense of that because it's the foundation of my work of others, but also I think it's a way forward. And that's really what I'm trying to get to here. The word, don't be scared, is cybernetics. Now, you probably just immediately thought of robotics or cyborgs or AI or biomechatronics. Lots of fun to say, I recommend it. Neural implants where you can read my mind and so on. Now, some of this is very valuable. For example, prosthetic devices and compensating for issues of the body, the physical body. But it's not any of these things. And for those of you who are a little worried, it's not freezing dead people, which was asked of me once at a conference. That's a true story. It's a discipline. It looks at systems, any system, in terms of its purpose. And let's go back to the origin of the word cybernetics. You may know this even from the original Greek. The word pilot, as in the human that steers a ship, has a sense of a goal, the current goal, the goal may change, but is blown off course in the process of trying to get there by disturbances in the environment. So when that happens, you see where you want to go, you see where you're really going, and you make a correction to come back. The word feedback largely took off in literature and in writing and in the parlance of science because of cybernetics, because it wanted to look at a system not in terms of what it's made out of, but in terms of the information it uses to achieve and define its goals. So it was a shift from the material aspects of systems and the boundaries of physics and biology and linguistics and so on into the immaterial. Now, cybernetics is when I, for example, look at a homeostatic system, my thermostat in this room, keeping me warm, I hope, or in the body and so on, and I describe it in terms of its purpose. Senses the current temperature of the body, sees it's a little cold, increases blood flow, whatever it may be. Now, these are attributes that I give this description. And this is cybernetics in its first formulation, not in terms of temporal order, but sort of the first thing you come across if you think about this. It's the science of the observed system, the thermostat, or my temperature. But of course, if you're going to talk about systems that are observed, you need an observer. And if cybernetics is the seeking of purpose, and this was its revolution in science and philosophy and perhaps other things, then to be a true and consistent cybernetic person, I must look at my own purpose in the way that I describe what I describe. I look at my own looking and I realize, oh, my purpose was to explain cybernetics in terms of whatever it might be. But what I also have to realize, once I look at my own looking, is that embedded in that looking and embedded in the description and the language that I use are my experience preferences, what I forefront. I'm making choices in how I choose to describe the system of purpose that I'm interested in, right? So my values and preferences and biases are in there, unavoidably, undeniably. So this is obviously about subjectivity. Maybe it's one of the reasons why cybernetics is misunderstood and some people think it's been dead for decades and so on and so forth. I beg to differ. Heinz von Foerster, great Austrian physicist and cybernetician, said, quote, "Objectivity is the delusion that observations could be made without an observer." QED, may I say that? So the awareness that my intentions are incorporated in my being, and therefore my expressions and my observations, is the point. This is cybernetics. Why is this helpful? Well, I start from the idea that experience cannot be digitized. And the digital culture that I alluded to before, with its definitions, with my characterization of its definitions, taking responsibility, is only one way. And I have an imagination for a preferred future, which instead of being grounded in the machinery and the digital culture, could be grounded in the humane, human, and analog. I want to sway, right? And I would claim that cybernetics, stories and justifications for another time, is bilingual in this sense. This was a phrase I got from Karen Kornblum. It's a bilingual synthesis or bilingual sensibility of both the technical, the quantitative, the mechanistic, the machinic, if you like, and the organic, the qualitative, the biological. Karen also says, computation is to artificial intelligence as conversation is to cybernetics. That's a precursor line. Let me explain how we get there. So earlier, interaction. Instead of thinking about interaction as this mechanistic thing, back and forth, input, output, Can we construe it as conversational, where each gesture or action or message coming at me is an invitation? And it's a triggering, right? The information is not in the words, as another colleague of mine likes to say. There's no information in the book. The information is what occurs when the words of the book come at me and triggers in me the meaning that I am able to bring to it. Information, therefore, I've gotten ahead of myself, is about not the specific content in that exchange, but rather the response I have as the receiver of this signal, and I interpret it. So the significance of the message is not in the message, but it's what is produced in me. It's ambiguous and analog rather than deterministic and easily predictable. Okay. So now intelligence is not a property of me or a property of you. It's a property of the interaction. It's a consequence of what we are able to do together. And these analog frames bring us, I think, beautifully into the world of conversation. So again, from Karen Kornblum, computation is to artificial intelligence, computation, AI, as conversation is to cybernetics, because it's through conversation that we enable these ideas of information, interaction, and intelligence. It's the minimum requirement for conversation, I would say. So back to the ideas of novelty, transparency, choice, and conversation. What if we imagined more, we listened more, we worried more, just checking time, about wanting to open possibilities rather than tell me facts? Facts are good, love facts. There are no alternative facts, but they're social agreements. Stories for another time. Wow, that's a rabbit hole, forgive me. Okay. I'm trying to stay on point. Conversation comes in a context. This is a kind of context. We're not having a conversation yet because I'm not hearing your responses. I'm sure there are little bombs going off in your head, and I look forward to hearing them all. There's a common language sufficiently to get us going, and then we have this exchange of messages which triggers and so on, and then we may come to an agreement. And as a result of that agreement, we may decide to work together to coordinate our actions, to go from somewhere to somewhere else. So let's pull back. Why do I think conversation is important? And why do I bring it up in the context of wanting to address the wicked challenges of the world? Well, if we were to try to address the wicked challenges of the world, I can't do it alone, you can't. We have to act together. To act together, we have to have an agreement. To have an agreement, we have to engage in order to reach the agreement. And to engage, we have to at least begin with a shared language, develop consensual vocabulary, preferences, priorities, and so on, and build a worldview that we share sufficiently in order to coordinate our actions. So conversation, then, is a precursor to cooperation and collaboration. If we do that, what might happen? Well, we might create a shared history. We have a shared history now a little bit. I've never seen many of you before, but now you hear a little bit about where I'm coming from. I hope we can begin a conversation that will continue beyond this session. Shared history might lead to a relationship. We agree to stay in touch. We agree to want to continue to be connected. That may build trust. It may build respect, and it may build a unity, right? And from that unity, what can come? Community, commerce, culture, government, and indeed society. Now, I could go at length into what I feel is effective conversations. For example, there's a continuity of it. It leads to agreements, including agreements to disagree. It enables coordination and so on. And I'm giving you a very easy, sanitized way of describing something that's very messy and very complicated. And I haven't brought in the emotional side of everything that's part of being human. But what's a great conversation? There's momentum in a great conversation. It brings surprises and energy. I'll come back to that. It goes places you don't expect to go. It's generative if it's an effective conversation or a great conversation. And it evolves in ways you couldn't evolve on your own. And one of the things I really like about conversation, it's not a zero-sum game. I can give you every idea I have, and I still have them. And you can judge which ones are valuable to you, and you can add your ideas and so on. So a great conversational partner, think about ChatGPT for a moment, asks great questions, offers different ways to achieve your goal. Maybe it's getting there a little bit. Collaborates with you to define new goals, but also helps you to be what you want to be, what you want to become, not just be, but also become. So it's about becoming. So conversation opens possibilities. Now, algorithms engage us for the sake of the platform, for money. Couldn't we make algorithms that engage us for the sake of novelty and feeding curiosity? You might say, well, you know, with Facebook, it gives me all the stuff I can read. I think you see it's different. I won't give you the full dissection here. Shared creativity, I think, is where I would like to see it go. So what's my proposal? I'm not saying we're going to take down Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it. We're not going to take down the big platform companies. Governments might try to do some work there. I'm not sure how far they'll get, but, you know, go with God. Good luck. What I would like to do, and what I've been wanting to do, is to provide alternatives. To say, this is an algorithm that does this, that's based on digital culture. How about one here that's based on conversation novelty and could become a viable online system? Not going to make you 40 billion, might make you 5 billion. That's not chump change. So by beginning to gather existing algorithms and existing digital frameworks and providing alternatives, what do I mean? Collecting them, offering case studies, suggesting that those in the world of design and entrepreneurship and business, but also education, might use these as a compendium of alternatives, the analog alternative, or better, the synthesized alternative of both AI and cybernetics. Because I think this bilingual sensitivity that it brings is very powerful. It's, for me, a way forward to collect alternatives. Now, I've been talking about one studio in the context of a larger framework that my colleagues and I have called colloquies. Talking to England, you know that word. Colloquies for transgenerational collaboration. Now, cybernetics began with the idea of being transdisciplinary, right? Any discipline can come into the conversation. It's about purpose and information and feedback and so on, and goals. But that was 20th century. That was 1940s, 1950s. Here, geographical is obviously critical. All the reasons you know, diverse and inclusive, et cetera. But also a very important emphasis, as you hear in the phrase, colloquies for transgenerational, is transgenerational. Because I question how easy it is to talk across the generations. There's less in common in terms of the educational base, right? We're not all taking liberal arts. Thank you for the thumbs up, right? And I don't even know if I say a sentence whether someone a generation or two, forgive the term, younger than I am, has the same meaning. So the worldview is a very serious issue for me. I don't know how to bridge the worldview. Just a blanket statement. So in these colloquies, we imagined to bring together two sides of a conversation. The first side is grad students, rising faculty. What wicked challenges are you interested in? What domain? What are your concerns? Why are you emotionally invested in this? And where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What are your values and your interests? And to pair them, or create a small group, with what we're calling a practitioner, although this distinction is loose. A practitioner in the sense of someone in the world who resonates with this idea and who can come in conversation for collaboration. Not mentorship, not expert, but collaboration, someone practicing in the world already, someone perhaps in a more academic environment, but also beginning to practice. And again, this distinction shouldn't be held on to strictly. We had about a dozen meetings of this kind recently, a couple of weeks ago. We want to continue with it. We're looking for others who wish to join it. We're starting from that pedagogy because what we noticed, my colleague Omar Khan, head of the School of Architecture here at Carnegie Mellon, and I noticed is if you want to approach someone in systems and cybernetics because you're interested in a Wiki challenge, you know what response you get? Read my 50-page paper or listen to my two. This is not good pedagogy. Good pedagogy is starting from the domains and concerns of the generation who will inherit, who already have inherited the issues that are coming along. So from there, we wish to generate more events like that, create an archive of outcome and so on. So for me, cybernetics has all of the power of explanatory, of an explanatory discipline that is able to discuss the mechanics, the nitty-gritty, the positive, negative feedback, the cause and effect, et cetera, but also to encompass this idea of responsibility. I don't know if you know responsibility. I'm talking to the University of Cambridge. Responda, right? Again. Sponda is pledge. So if you have responsibility, you pledge, fill in the blank. You pledge to be aware, to be empathetic, to be humble, and to be humane. This is my view. This is what I think responsibility means in the cybernetic sense, because you know that when you look at your own looking, you are in that looking, and therefore you are responsible for transparency of who you are and what you mean and what you want, etc. There's a beautiful phrase you may know from Horst Rittel, who coined wicked problems as a phrase, which is the symmetry of ignorance, that if you're in a conversation, what you don't know and what the others don't know are not exactly on par with each other, but everyone in the conversation has something they don't know that others know. And this brings humility and empathy, but it allows us to be engaged and committed. So what do we want to make? I've given you an offer in these colloquies and in this broader context of wishing to challenge what comes out of the digital culture. Here's another Weizenbaum quote: "Never substitute a computer system for a human function that involves interpersonal respect, understanding, and love." 1976. Never substitute a computer system for a human function that involves these things. So another class of way forward is to think and to respond to what the common vocabulary is and what's going on. And I'd like to introduce you to the work of a colleague of mine here, Dr. Jill Fain Lehman, and there are some pointers to her work in the links again. She asks the question very eloquently, and I can't do it full service here, but I'll give you an overview and you'll see how it connects to my theme, to say, what should we use, what might we use large language models and chat systems and wherever they go for, and what ought we not use them for? This is very much in the tradition of Weizenbaum, who is saying, what do we expect from machines and what can we not get from machines? So more than anyone else I've seen, and here at Carnegie Mellon have been many lectures, what Dr. Lehman is doing is saying, wait a minute, let's remember what meaning is. And my whole launch into the idea of meaning, I credit to her. Meaning is, as she would say, it's grounded in experience. And as I said earlier, experience can't be digitized. It's multimodal, right? Many senses going on in parallel, and it's idiosyncratic. And she goes into this more than I will today. I'm just trying to give you a flavor of its dimensions. She also says, and I love this, words are also about what's left out. So ChatGPT can absorb all the world's words, but the question becomes, what does it not know because it's not in the words, but in the experience of having grown up as a human? Again, what Weizenbaum says, having been born of a mother, having a body, and so on. This is not a trivial distinction. And if we wish to keep who we are, we have to stay true, I think, to what it means to be human. And she has a wonderful examples of an exchange where one of you might say lunch, and the other person says, I have class at 1. And the response is, okay, this restaurant? Now, inside of that is an enormous amount of understanding coming from experience that are not in the words. So it's a cautionary tale, which she then extrapolates. And there's a wonderful presentation she gives that's in the links. Skilled jobs at risk, sermons in church, therapists, tricky. Judges' aides, helping judges make judgments. You've probably heard of examples of that. Not such a good idea. On the other hand, helping write code, sure. Doing protein research. Building chatbots where when you're ordering food online or in a fast food place to help you get through that, maybe, why not? But as she would say, meaning matters. And it's a non-trivial situation. The other thing I'd like to point you to is, this is a book called Private Eye that Dr. Lehman and I, to some extent, and Ashley Watson have been working on. A story of intrigue, romance, murder, and AI. In this, Dr. Lehman manages to put ideas of what it means to have a personal digital device. We sort of have them in our phones and so on. They're not terribly personal. But also challenges what it means to have an intelligence at all, and what may be alternatives. It's done in the style of what we're calling cyber noir. And I recommend it if you're interested in fiction. Almost done. So what culture do we have? We have a digital culture, I claim. I'm not so happy about that. Which one do we want? We, of course, want things that are new. We're human, right? That's always what we want. But if we make something new, if we bring in something new, there's a danger of losing something else. And Humberto Maturana, the Chilean biologist, has wonderful words about this. He says, before we embrace something new and make something new, might we start with what we want to conserve, what we don't want to lose, even as we make this new thing or bring this new thing into our world. And that sounds like, well, that's really, conservative, and you're not going to get anywhere, and you're not going to get anything new. But he goes on and he says, if you define or begin to create a boundary around the things you don't want to lose when you make something new, you open the space of possibilities in which new things can occur without as much sacrificing the things you don't want to lose. So embrace the new. We want the new, but can we think a little bit about what it would mean to lose being human, etc.? And I had a conversation recently with another wonderful colleague, Dr. Larry Richards, and we talked about the new. And I said, Larry, why do we want the new as human beings? Why do we choose novelty and so on? And he said immediately, without missing a beat, he said, we need it. As humans, we need it. We want the surprise and the energy. You can think already about what the evolutionary implications of this are. And for me, the new comes through conversation. I may be thinking about it myself. I may be making something and having a kind of conversation through the medium of my pencil when I'm sketching and so on. But conversation is an essence. So for me, I'm focused on what do we want from the meaning in the conversations. We want to generate new knowledge, right? We want to explore what is important to us and what means, what things mean to us, right? Again, the meaning is not in the message that you speak to me. The meaning is in what I make of it. So this brings us back to interaction. It also is potentially full of friction. We might disagree, it might get messy. A lot of stuff in the world getting messy today, right? But we can go in either direction. Again, think about my opening questions. We can choose to avoid and eliminate and sanitize by only dealing with a bot that is giving me what I want, what it thinks I want in terms of algorithm and so on. Or we can embrace the friction and the disagreements and the differences and the diversity. But in doing that, by embracing those things, we maintain novelty and choice. We maintain our agency in it. We don't give up our agency to algorithms, which I think we've likely done. And we all know and desire the new. We love the, oh, wow, I understand, or that's a great idea, or et cetera. And I think there are two classes of this. One is when we recognize in someone else a human feeling that we resonate with and empathize. That's one sort of class. But the other is, that's a new idea I never thought of before. That vibrates inside of me. That is life affirming. That's exciting. That's the aha, the eureka moment, the wow. And these are life-giving. They're life affirming, life reaffirming. And it's about being alive, living in the moment. So the second question, do you want to be trapped in a room with a bot or trapped in a room with a human, despite all of the messiness that that means? It's up to you, your choice. This is the question. So I'd like to close with someone who I think is one of the great philosophical equivocators of all time, Stephen Sondheim. And if you know the work, you'll know exactly what I mean. Here's the quote from a song. Someone to hold you too close, someone to hurt you too deep, someone to sit in your chair and ruin your sleep, to make you aware of being alive. Make me alive, make me confused, mock me with praise, let me be used, vary my days. For alone is alone, not alive. So I think we have to make this choice. How much time do we want to spend alone with our devices? Yes, we're talking to people and there's chatting and so on and so forth. It's not the same. Experience cannot be digitized. Sherry Turkle's work, you must know, a book title of hers is Together Alone. This is the point. So how do we bring back, how do we swing the pendulum away from this highly digitized world that we have created toward an analog world, not erasing the former, but incorporating it in a way that maintains our humanity? The world is a messy place. It is so unpredictable and so unknowable, especially in the modern age with all of the wicked challenges of the world. So we may feel unprepared. I feel unprepared. I think the culture is unprepared. The governments are unprepared. But I think the more aware we can be, the better. And so for me, some of the work I've mentioned, the researchers I've mentioned, and the directions I've mentioned, I hope are a way of becoming more aware, more human, more biological, and respecting our need to live in a world favorable to life and to living. So one more from Stephen Sondheim, same song. Somebody crowd me with love, somebody force me to care, somebody let me come through. I'll always be there, as frightened as you, to help us survive. Being alive. Being alive. Being alive. Thank you very much.